by hand. Yeah, he's a contractor.
This isn't built by amateurs.
But there was a lot of work that went into this, and I'm sure obviously a lot of money.
And they were 100.
Yeah, they are. They are.
So anyway, where I'm going with all of that is this is a really nice cabin that I'm sure that they want to keep nice for a long time to come. So just some things that we'd like to have everybody.
Two little questions, but we will answer questions. Okay, Tasha, do you have a question you want to ask your Grandma? Tasha, do you have a question you want to ask Grandma and Grandpa about when we were little kids?
Mary, what happened? Huh?
Okay. Listen to Savannah. She's got a question. What question?
Here's a question for you.
That's not really a question.
What is that?
Could I tell you a story when I was a little boy?
I get that request every night.
Okay.
Grandpa, tell us about the time that you were showing off the new tiller.
Okay. You want to hear this story? My dad bought a brand new tiller that you till the ground with. And when you started it, you had to put a rope in and go around and around and around and then pull it to start the engine. However, back in those days, if you put that rope on backwards, instead of starting the engine, it'd pull the rope out of your hand and the handle would go like that and around. Well, I wanted to show my uncle how I could start that engine. And so my uncle's name was Uncle Harold Hexer. And what he did was, he stood there and I said, "Dad, can I start it? Can I start it?" He said, "Okay, go ahead." So I hurried and wrapped it around there and I put it the wrong way. And when I pulled that, the rope pulled out of my head and went around and around that thing, and it just beat his gas tank to pieces. And my dad's eyes got just like this. Momentarily, he went insane. And he come after me. And I ran as hard as I could run. And he couldn't catch me. But I knew I was going to get it later on. But I think because my Uncle Harold was there, we called him Uncle Curly, my dad kind of simmered down. And they said, "Don't ever, ever do that again."
How long did you have to sleep in the hall?
I'll bet he said it
So-
differently. When I was a little girl, about Savannah's age, no, Ellie's age,
I know this.
or Stuart's age, my mom and my grandma were outside hanging up clothes on the clothesline to dry, and it was in the winter, and we had a fish pond out in the backyard, but they brought the fish in and put them in an aquarium so they wouldn't freeze. And when my grandma and my mother came in the house, I was standing on a chair with my hand in the fish bowl, and I had bit a goldfish in half. Except I didn't bite it totally in half. It was just, it was almost dead. And they said, "Why did you do that?" And I said, "Fishy bite me, I bite fishy." That's it.
And that's when Grandma decided that she loved seafood.
Tell me what you remember about your wedding day.
It was on November 17, 1960.
I'm not telling you.
We're coming up on 50 years here, you know.
That's right.
48 years this year.
And what I remember was, when I got through eating the cake and the reception, I fell asleep. I was so tired.
You don't remember it? You don't remember anything about the temple or
Yeah, I remembered
what
all about
what Elder Chris Jansen told you or any of that?
I
Yep.
don't remember that.
Elray Christiansen at the time was the president of the Salt Lake Temple, and he married us. And years later, he came to our ward with President Kimball to dedicate our ward. so I liked him so much, I went and took a Polaroid picture of him and President Kimball. Well, I went and had them developed, and I took them to Salt Lake.
They were Polaroids, weren't they?
Yeah, they're Polaroids, and boy, they did a beautiful job on
Oh,
it.
they enlarged
Now,
them?
President Kimball, they just send me a note and thank me, because I couldn't see him, because he's a president of the church, and I'm nobody. But L. Ray Christiansen wrote me this big long letter, and I still have it. And he says, "You are such an excellent photographer. Would you be our personal photographer?" And I was so embarrassed because I didn't do anything special. I just took an old Polaroid camera and took a picture.
But it was a contest winner.
Was it good?
It was.
Yeah. And so that's kind of interesting, I guess.
But that
Mom-
wasn't your wedding day.
What do you remember about your wedding day?
What do I remember? I remember I got up that morning and I was scared to death, and I went for a walk and I told my mom, I said, if he calls, I'm not here. I don't want to see him. Well,
Why didn't you listen to those impressions?
I don't know. I came back and we went to the temple in Salt Lake. Grandpa and his best man, Larry Florence, kind of got us together. And all the way down to Salt Lake, I kept saying, I don't know if this is right. I don't know if we should go through with this. I don't know if I want to do this. And finally we hit about Bountiful, and Grandpa said, if you say that one more time, we're going to turn around. And I didn't.
And I meant it.
And we got to the temple, and I was still nervous, but when I saw him, he was at the top of the stairs, and were you at the top or was I at the top? Anyway,
Outside?
I looked on the stairway, and there he was in his white temple clothes, and it made me kind of weepy-eyed, and we went in and we were married.
Okay.
Answer a prayer that happens to you.
I'll tell you one answer to prayer. One time when I was working for the bank, I was over the master charge, the credit card department, and we had bank examiners. And they wanted some certain records. Bank examiners come in the bank to see if all things are going right. And if they're not, they can get you in big trouble. And they wanted to see these certain records, and I couldn't find them. So when I went home for lunch, I said a prayer. And on the way back, in my mind, I could see where they were, and I could see it right exactly in this office where they were. And when I got into the bank, I walked over there, and I opened the book, and they were there. And that was one of the most readily answered prayers I ever had.
Did you have a spiritual confirmation that you were called a bishop?
Yes, I did. Did you?
Yeah, by and by.
By and by, I did.
And I was seriously questioning for a while.
My spiritual experience was that I was so totally humble. I told President Gibby, I says, when the interview came, I says, I don't think I can do this. I said, I have these kids, and we're trying to raise them, and we got a lot of disorganization and all this kind of stuff. And he looked at me and he says, your kids will help you. And I said, they will? And so,
What's that supposed to mean?
And they never did.
so anyway, after that, after I was set apart, I would know certain things about my calling that I didn't understand or didn't know before, and certain people that I talked to, I could say things and talk to them and was given words that I wouldn't have normally said. Did that happen to you?
How about you, Mom? Did you ever receive a confirmation of his calling?
I can remember when President Gibby, he interviewed us, hurry fast. He interviewed us separately, and when he called me in, he said,
Listen.
Sister Beckett, you have a fine husband here, and he said, we've issued him a call,
But he
and
still beat you. No, he didn't say that.
he said,
threw that
we've
in.
issued him a call, and he has accepted the call. And I looked and I said, what is it? And he said, you've been called to serve a mission. And all I could think of was, oh my heavens. And I said, where? And he said, Africa.
You really did this?
Yeah,
I've never heard
he
this.
really did.
You heard this?
And already in my mind I'm thinking, what are we going to do at the house? What are we going to do with all the kids' school records? And then he started to laugh. In the meantime, I was crying.
She was hoping. She cried when she found out I wasn't going to Africa.
I've heard this.
We were supposed to go together.
Oh,
But anyway, I can remember when he was called, and I didn't realize this, but the wife does have a lot to do with the bishopric. And we discussed names for counselors. I remember we would go out in our little camp trailer where it was quiet, no telephone and no kids, and we would pray. We would look at names and we would pray about counselors. And I don't know if Dave and John went through that, but that's what we were told to do. And everything seemed right.
while she's saying that, I'm going to mention something. I recorded on a talk by President he was one of the presidents of BYU, which is Holland, Jeffrey Holland. And in this talk, he told about Marion G. Romney and how his wife had fallen into a coma, and he didn't know what to do. And this was before he was a general authority. And he kept going to the hospital, and he gave her blessings, and he did all these things, and he was beside himself. And so he got on his knees, and he prayed and prayed and prayed, and he asked Heavenly Father, why aren't I getting an answer? Is this something, my wife gonna die? What's going on? And he got an answer, and he said a voice came to him very distinctly, because he says something to the effect that my wife, don't you care about my wife? Don't you care about me? And the voice distinctly said, yes, I care about you, but you have the authority to give her back she was in a coma, give her back her original personality and everything else. So he goes to the hospital, and he lays his hands upon her head, and he commanded her to come out of the coma. And when she came out of the coma, she said, first thing she did, she looked at him and she says, what are you doing here? And this is, I got this on a tape, and you got to listen to it. It is the most amazing thing. So when you hold the priesthood, and then right after that, he was called to be a general authority. And so, in fact, he served in the first presidency. But you got to remember, when you hold the priesthood, you are acting for God when you're on the earth. And so you have to be very careful with your thoughts and what you do. And if you do that, Heavenly Father can accomplish amazing things, just like President Romney. I just thought I'd throw that in.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
I don't remember who was in the car, but one time Dad was driving us somewhere, and there was this guy in our ward named Dwayne Durfee. And to It was so funny because, anyway.
Any more questions? Okay. What? You want to answer yours first? Or do you want me to answer?
Go ahead.
My favorite holiday was Christmas. And the reason it was is because at Christmas time, my parents were very poor and we lived in Grandview Acres. And we asked Santa Claus for some presents and we didn't know if we were going to get them. And on Christmas Eve, Santa Claus came, and the next morning those presents were under the tree. And I had an Uncle Leonard and an Aunt Rhea who used to come and visit us. And Uncle Leonard and Aunt Rhea were very generous. And I think they paid Santa Claus off to do that.
Can I tell a Christmas story
Sure.
that illustrates what a softy dad can be? I remember the Barnetts came down to visit one Christmas, and I think it was kind of an unannounced visit. And they showed up. I think it was possibly on Christmas Eve or something, and they didn't have any presents there or anything. So Dad went over to the store and bought each of the kids presents so that on Christmas morning they'd have something to open. And they were just shocked, and I was shocked because I thought, that was really a Christ-like thing to do, and it was probably because of your experience that you had with your Uncle Leonard and Aunt Rhea that you did that.
Was that the same Christmas when you lifted up your toupee and frightened one of the...
No, I was about 7 years old.
No,
No, I wasn't that old.
when Uncle Bud's family came, and you lifted up your toupee, and that child was never right again after that.
Most of those kids were never right.
Was it you that lifted up my two?
Or you did it. And he started screaming.
Where and how did the two of you meet?
Well, I had a
Tell us the real story.
Here's the real story. There was a guy named Larry Florence who served in my mission. And when I got home, he set up he was going to set me up a date with a girl named Carol, what's her last name? Richardson. And I went out with her sister before when my mother used to make me go with my cousin and this girl to these dances at this church. And so I had to go with her sister all the time. And this is her, and so Carol he was gonna line me up with Carol. So then I get ready to go, and all of a sudden I get this phone call, and he says, she's got something going. She can't go on this date, but her friend's gonna go. And I thought, wow, what's her friend like? And then we went and picked her friend up, and we went to the Egyptian Theater to a show, and I noticed when I held her hands, her arms
Man,
were so... Her arms
You moved pretty quick.
Well, when we're walking down the street, her arms were so long, I had to reach down and pick them up.
They called her Megillah.
And she was such a classy chick. I called her the next day and asked her to go out again. And so from then on, she just latched on to me, and I was a goner.
What's your version, Mom?
My version was I was sitting in nursing lecture, and we were sitting on the back row, and Carol and I were writing notes back and forth. Carol wrote me a note and said she had this date with this Larry, but she didn't want to go with him. Would I go? And I said no. And she kept writing me these notes telling me why I should go, and I kept saying, why? What have you ever done for me? I remember writing it. I should have kept them. And anyway, I decided to go with him. As it turned out, I knew actually who he was because I was in a sorority called Charmea, and he was in a fraternity called Phoenix. And we had actually been to different parties at the same time.
Warm.
Yes. And anyway, so I knew who he was. Well, we went out that night, and the next day I was a bridesmaid up in Burley to another nursing student. And the kids up there said, "How was your date last night?" And I said, "It was really fun. Do you think you'll ever go out with him again?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll bet I'm either pinned to him or get his ring." And it was a class ring. That's what you used to do.
What did into him mean?
Now you see what I mean? How she
I had a similar
So anyway,
That's a lesson to you girls. When you get the right guy, go after him.
the next day, he called and said, would I like to go out to sacrament meeting with him? It was the days before the 3-hour block. And I said yes, and so we did. We went to sacrament meeting, and then we went over to Uncle Curly's house, and they played guitar and sang, and I was mortified because they were singing these bluegrass songs that were horrible.
Like bad singer or bad song?
Didn't
Well,
like
she
it.
was trained classical. She
However,
played the
that-
oboe and the sax and the piano. And we were lowlifes playing guitars and singing about beer halls and stuff like that.
However, on the way home that night, we talked about getting married. I mean, it was right. We actually talked about getting married, as into each other.
So, Grandma, tell us 3 things about Grandpa that attracted you. Tell us 3 things about Grandpa that you thought made him attractive or appealing as a spouse.
Save his body.
What was that? What was the question and what did he say? I'm cutting him out of the will.
I mean, obviously there was something about him if it was that quick that you thought.
He was good looking for one thing. He had lots of curly hair. But I knew he was very
I
smart.
won't cut him out of the will. That's okay.
And I
That's
actually
good.
knew he was talented after I heard him play the guitar, even though
See?
I didn't like the kind of music. And I knew he was, I assumed that he was very spiritual because we had gone to sacrament meeting together. So, but it wasn't a big thunderbolt come down. It was just right. 48 years later. By the way, we went out on April 22nd. We talked about marriage on April 24th. And I got my engagement ring on July 4th. And we were married November 17th.
How did he propose? I don't ever know that story.
And wasn't Laura born on December 6th? I
Yes,
always wondered about that.
Dad, you
the
can
following year.
I'm the same way.
Yeah, right.
Well, Dad, everything I know.
Yeah, is there anything you want to talk about, Dave?
Huh?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
Okay, where was I created? Now it's out.
No, what? How did he propose?
Quit trying to change the subject.
Okay,
I don't know, it was
let me
just-
tell you something. It's like when you sleep. It isn't the amount of time that you sleep, it's the quality of sleep. And
Start young children in the vicinity, please.
Let me see.
Hey, how did he propose?
well, here's what I'm
I
gonna
really
tell you.
don't know.
It didn't take
Let me
a long
see.
We just
time.
talked
Let me see
about
me.
It
getting
didn't take
married.
me long. it didn't take me a long time to figure out I wanted to marry her. It's just like when I go shopping and buy a gift. When I see a gift for somebody, I know that they like it and I buy it. I don't stand there and go through all these.
Did you pick out her ring, or did you guys pick it out together?
Picked it out
Change it.
together.
Change it. Change it.
And as we picked it out, but I didn't get it. And so this one day I said, when am I going to get my ring? And he said, if you'll buy me this certain record album, we'll go and buy your ring. So he took me home to get my wallet with my money in it, and we went and bought
You're smooth.
the record.
Wait a minute.
I think that's happened
I
to me
think
once
that
before.
story is a little.
I don't think so. And we went to West Jewelers and picked
Then
up
what
my
was the
ring.
name of the record?
It was Tubbs, Ernest Tubbs.
And I can't think.
It was Hank Thompson.
I knew it.
Was it?
Yep.
Hey,
Okay, she asked me how
Oh, sorry.
I got my name. I have 3 names. I have a surname, and I have a first name, and I have a middle name. My mother was delivering me, or was supposed to be delivering me through a doctor named Vernon Ward. Well, Dr. Vernon Ward went deer hunting, because that was a deer hunting weekend, and so the intern delivered me, and so she names me Vernon. And
Just
I
to
didn't
thank
know
him.
that
It
until
doesn't make
years later.
sense.
Hoping you'll be a better doctor and take his place.
I don't know. But let me tell you something. Then my dad was really crude,
No, do it again.
and I was named after my aunt. Let's see, she's a great aunt from Ireland, Mary Ann Riley. So I got the name Riley from that. And then when I was about 8 or 10 years old, we got a great big old fat pig to kill and eat. And my dad says, "You eat just like that pig." So he named the pig Riley. You believe that? That's terrible.
You know what I didn't realize is that Riley is such a popular name now.
They're right. He's probably watching right now, and he's probably laughing his head off.
How about you, Mom?
Where did I get my name?
Yes.
My name was supposed to have been Betty. And when I was born, my dad, in those days you didn't know what the baby was until you saw the baby. And anyway, actually my mother didn't see me until the day after. But my dad said we're going to name her Barbara after his mother had been raised by his Aunt Barbara because his mother had died of smallpox. And he was only about 3 years old, and so she had raised him, or raised her. And so they named me after her, and my mother's name was Allie, so I was named Allie. Barbara Allie.
Lion Flying Alley.
That's a
That's
good
what the
story.
neighbor that went off the deep end used to call her. She came down to her house one day and got mad at her for some reason. And she said, "Lion Flying Alley."
She's always going to steal her husband.
If Allie would have been trying to steal Harvey from Mildred,
Yeah, that's what it was. She thought Barbara's mother was trying to steal her husband. He's this little fat guy that worked for Shoot Williams Candy Company.
He looked like Elmer Fudd.
Hey, my question goes along with those. It's
Okay.
how did you choose your children's names?
Whoa, you're getting into something pretty
Lorraine
spiritual.
was named before we even got married. She went to Lagoon. Who did we see?
Nat King Cole.
She's got a pair of eyes.
Nat King Cole.
Master Yoda.
She's got a pair of eyes that are bluer than the summer sky.
When you see them, you realize.
Anyway, she was named after
When
the
I'm with
song
my
Sweet
sweet
Lorraine.
She's named after what?
When I'm with my
Sweet Lorraine. David when I was about 6 months pregnant, I had the same dream several times where we had this little blonde boy and his name was David, and I really didn't care for the name. I would have never named, in fact, we'd thought about Michael or Jeffrey. But when the doctor held him up, it was this blonde baby boy, and there was no way that we could have named him anything else but
We
David.
didn't dare. And David, the name David means beloved. And you need to read the Bible about David and how he slew Goliath. That's a neat story. Well,
Paul was named, you named Paul, and I really,
Spring it.
I'm not sure why.
Oh, great.
I really am not.
Paul means devil child.
well, I
John,
always liked the name of the Apostle Paul.
Are you making this up?
No. When I went to
It was random, wasn't
When
it?
I went to Weber State College, I had an institute teacher called Odell, and he talked at my mission farewell, and he taught the life and letters of the Apostle Paul. And I was so intrigued with what the Apostle Paul did and how he was such a great man, and he is. You got to read his life. That when you were born, I thought that would be a great name. I didn't know how you were going to turn out.
You were just hoping.
John was named after Grandpa's.
John, want to know how you got named?
John Charles. Okay, Paul,
Was Charles ever turned Barkley?
David Vernon, obviously Vernon was why. Paul, Leslie was Grandpa's. Grandpa Beckett's middle name.
Are you snickering over
Aren't you
there?
glad we didn't name you Paul Fred?
Yes, thank you.
Or Fred Paul?
Yes, thank you.
John was named after Grandpa Hegstrom, John Hegstrom, and also my mother's father, John Henry Warren. Charles was after my father. Jim was named after my favorite uncle, Uncle Jim Wheeler. Riley was because of Grandpa Beckett's.
The pig.
No, it was because that was a family name. And Mary
So
Ann
was
Riley-
the pig.
Yep.
No, but that's
And
not why. My dad liked to do things like that. He was a good man, but he wasn't very nice. My
Bull.
father.
what did I say?
Now you're on Stephen. Or Step Hen, as we like to call him.
Stephen was named, we like the name Stephen. It happened to be a very popular name. And
We look for biblical names.
Wasn't Stephen
Right.
named after?
actually I had a crush on a boy one time whose name was Stephen. I might as well say that.
Say that again.
Did you miss James?
Didn't I say Jim?
What was he named after?
Uncle Jim.
And Warren was after my mother's maiden name.
We were going to have a Peter, James, and John, but it was just James.
What about
and
Frisky?
John. All James and John.
Who was Frisky named after?
Frisky was named after a little fuzzy dog.
Who in this room knows who the Apostle Stephen was and what happened to him?
When he was stoned?
And how did he? What was his situation when he was stoned?
Didn't he say
He felt he did not feel
he saw the Savior and
right. He had such faith that he never felt the pain, the physical pain. And I don't know how to say this. I'm going to get in trouble if I do.
Just say.
But every time you go to the
Sorry, Grandma.
temple,
Okay, you guys, today's a week off. She gets to be
I
heard.
won't say it then. Everybody's on their seat now.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna say anything.
If it's in the scriptures, you can say it.
gather it all up there.
Huh?
This dog.
That shocked me when I went through the temple. Because every time you go through the temple,
Where's that big puppy
you
dog?
take a name through for somebody.
But she has to be in her pajamas now. 'Cause it's night. I'll show you how to. I'll put on her pajamas. I'll put on her clothes. It's fine.
Well, how did I handle that?
That was good.
Not
Okay.
well.
Not well?
No, I think that was good.
I have a question
They
for
all
Grandma.
have cages.
What's the most embarrassing moment that's ever happened to you?
But what I gotta tell you is if you ever divulge what you learn in the temple, your whole posterity will go to hell.
Any moment you wish never happened?
Crap, that's all of us. You better not say it.
Wait, Mom's on her most embarrassing moment.
I'm trying to think and I can't think.
Oh, come on, it couldn't be that hard.
I know. Well, just
It takes a lot to embarrass.
Wait, Steve's gonna help you.
just an embarrassing moment, not the most embarrassing.
They announced Laura's gender, or they held up Laura after she was born, and you
Oh,
said,
there we go.
boy.
They held Laura up and I said, oh, a boy, just what Vernon wanted.
That was the morphine talking.
Steve, I have another one to add to that.
And he said, and I thought you were a nurse.
And I thought you were a nurse.
But they had given me just a little bit of anesthesia.
Just a little.
Get the camera over here, please. Thank you.
Mom had taken you and I
Saw
to the
things
Red
that
Barn.
weren't there.
Oh, that was funny.
She had taken you and I to the Red Barn. and
We were there though too.
Huh?
I was there too.
Oh,
We
Steve.
dropped Grandma off at the airport.
We were sitting in a booth next to a guy that was smoking up a storm. And the guy kept taking a puff and he'd blow it over into our booth. Do you remember this? So Steve takes a big old straw full of strawberry shake and he turns around and let the guy have it. And I thought Mom was
That was very
I haven't got that.
I'd be really mad when we got outside and she was laughing.
Good job.
I had to be mad at him or chastise him in front of the man.
Oh, Stuart just got a big grin on his face.
What a great idea.
I gotta tell you something about Lorraine. Back in those days, the father was not allowed in the delivery room. Now, the father can go and watch the baby born. In fact, I watched Tasha be born.
So I was there
So
too.
you weren't there for any
Yes, you
I was
were
watching
there
E.T.
too.
Well,
of us?
I was sitting on a red chair watching E.T.
I don't think so.
I think you were for the last two.
Were you there when any of us were conceived?
Okay, but I gotta tell you something funny.
Jim and Steve.
I went in there to see my new daughter. And she'd gone through the birth canal and had flattened her nose. And she looked like a prize fighter. And I said,
She did not. She was
Carmen
beautiful.
Basilio. He was a prize fighter.
Yeah, listen to the story that Grandpa. Hey, you gotta tell that again because I got in big trouble when Mary was little because of something I said.
Mary wouldn't talk to him for weeks.
So tell Mary what you just said about when Laura was born.
About her appearance. Just repeat what you just said.
When babies are born and they come out of the birth canal, their heads are squoze through such a
Sometimes.
small place that sometimes it flattens their nose. And they're, really.
Dude, that was a good demonstration. Do that
There's a
again.
Polynesian woman in our ward, an old Polynesian woman. If you want to come and see what they look like, you'll see her. She doesn't even have a nose. It's just like that. But anyway, we used to listen to the fights on radio, and there was a guy who was a middleweight champion of the world, and his name was Carmen Basilio, and I said, she looks just like Carmen Basilio.
She was beautiful. She had lots of dark hair.
And now she has a little dinky nose. She doesn't look like a prize fighter.
But she's a sweet big baby after that, and I had to take
So
her
are we
all
to
back.
understand that you were not there for any of our birds?
Jim and Steve.
Just Jim and just
I was there for all of you birds.
just for Jim and Steve.
Oh, I saw Jim and Steve born, but I didn't see the other guys born.
Time out.
What?
Time out. When
Were you there when any of us were conceived?
no, he was
No.
spaced out.
Immaculate Deception is what it was called. Not Immaculate Conception, Immaculate Deception.
When Laura was born, when Dave was born, and I'm gonna say when Paul, I can't remember, but anyway, he went home and went to bed while I stayed in labor.
Well, the band gets tired too, you know.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Right on, right, brothers?
Yeah. Birth was terribly.
Back massage, are you with me on that?
Yeah, but I
What are the sweetest words you ever heard? It's time for the epidural, right?
That's the funniest
That's right.
Sam,
It's time for the epidural.
Sam's telling it. Sam asked him a question.
that's not true. With my kids, I was there all by myself. In fact, on the one birth, he went and laid down in the next room on an empty bed.
Poor guy.
Well, he was
Did you do
tuckered
okay,
out.
Dad?
Well, he just asked me what was the funniest joke I ever heard. And that's a tough question.
I know what it
Have you heard the one about the sheep herder? Never mind, no. You don't have to do that
No.
one. Don't listen.
Well, I can't tell you this joke my dad told me.
No, he told Melissa too. The first time he met her, even when I asked him not to.
I
What
can't,
about the-
because
the
of the
duck?
younger audience, I can't tell the
Yeah,
joke.
the one about the duck.
But my dad told another joke all the time when people would come to the house.
Tell us when we go to the temple.
Huh?
Tell us that when we go to the temple.
Okay. Don't you remember the joke he'd always tell me?
Mexican short hair?
Huh?
The Mexican short hair?
Jim.
Yeah. He'd always say when someone came, he says,
The Mexican short hair.
What do you call?
Did you hear about the Mexican short hair?
Yeah,
He wasn't
you hear-
very fuzzy,
you
was he?
hear about- yeah, you know about the Mexican dog, the little dog? He wasn't fuzzy, was he? Who thought that really
Oh,
was?
it wasn't fuzzy.
Huh?
And was it given to you or did you buy it, work for it?
My first car was a 1936 Chrysler, and my dad bought it, and I was only 14.
Really?
Nice.
Were you able to drive it then?
Not legally.
Hey, Dad.
A 1936, what?
Chrysler, 4-door, black, and it had,
14.
it was a cute little car.
500 horsepower.
Huh?
500 horsepower.
She was
Okay,
14.
that was an embarrassing.
Turbo engine.
There was a little brown coupe, and did it have a rumble seat in it?
No, you could open the.
Well, remember the time when you went up or backed out and went around the thing and you pushed Lorraine out on the ground?
Hey, what about your car, Dad?
Huh?
What was your first car?
My first car was a 1940 torpedo back Pontiac, and I traded it into Hanson Chevrolet in Brigham City, and that was an Indian school there called, what was it? But anyway,
Intermountain.
about 6 Indians bought that car. They were tearing around town in that car. And I traded it in for a 50 Dodge that had, it's the first, it's not automatic drive, hydromatic drive, but it had some kind of an automatic. What is it, Jim? Huh? What do they call that? It was a Dodge Cornet, and it had a, you didn't have to shift it. It wasn't a hydromatic transmission. I don't know, it's close to what the hydromatic transmissions are, but I can't remember what they call it.
We just bought our car from Hampton. That's our suburban. So even talk, get ready
to Bryce, Zion, and Las Vegas.
What was your scariest experience of that?
What was what?
Your scariest experience? Either one of you. Like, either where you feared for your life or...
I don't know.
Remember Paul was not the
Oh, my scariest experience was I took all these kids to Yellowstone Park in a bus, and I had this old Scoutmaster hat that had the round brim, and all these people thought I was a ranger. And so they'd always start asking me questions, and these kids got a real kick out of that. And all of a sudden I saw these two elk off the side of the road, and I thought, man, this one was like this one. And so I thought, I got to get his picture. So I sneak up on him, and I take his picture, and I didn't notice the other elk who was just had a couple of forks. And he was standing over next to him, and all of a sudden that elk had his head down, and he was pawing, and then he started straight forward towards me, and I didn't know what to do. And I thought, I can't climb these trees. They had sap, and they're small trees anyway. And so I grabbed a stick. I grabbed a big stick. And as that elk got about where DJ was, I took that stick and I yelled as loud as I could, and I said, "Get out of here!" And it hit him right in the face. And boy, he up and whirled and went left. But I'll tell you, if he'd have got me, I'd have been a goner.
Me and Paul were watching that, and
His shorts, he had.
it was interesting because we started, it wasn't on the scout trip, by the way. I think we were with the family. Because
Yeah, it was a
He had to change his shorts.
And we saw him at the edge of the timber, so Dad tried to creep through the meadow, and me and Paul were with him. And he kept taking pictures of them, they just kept moving into the timber then. And there was this open meadow about 50 or 75 yards across inside of the timber. And Dad kept getting a little closer, and there was a 7-point bull elk and a 5-point bull elk. And he was taking pictures of the 7-point, and the 5-point was the one that was getting
I like the other story.
angry. And I can remember, I just thought, well, Dad knows what he's doing. Me and Paul were watching. And that thing came towards him, and Dad jumped back behind a couple of trees that were too narrow for the elk to get through
That's right.
with his antlers. And that's when he threw the thing in. It was a good shot. It hit him right on the nose, and it turned around and trotted away. And I don't think it came again after that. But
You want to know the dumbest thing I ever did? I walked up to a bison a bit, you know. Where's one? That one like that, he was feeding down along the river. And you read in the paper about how these things turn on people and kill them. They can run about 40, 50 miles an hour. So I go down get up close to him. They can. They can.
That's how fast cheetahs run.
And I took a picture of that, and I've got it home hanging over the piano. And I look at it and I think, boy, somebody was with me that day. So if that thing were to turn and come after me, I'd have never had a chance. Okay, here's a question somebody wants.
Wait. Mom didn't get to tell her scariest
Oh, I'm sorry.
experience.
I'm thinking.
Or Dad, did you have your most embarrassing moment? Did you tell us?
My most embarrassing moment?
Yeah. Was it when we painted your toenails and we went over to the terrace pool?
Yeah,
And
that was pretty bad.
I can tell that one.
That was pretty bad.
Grandpa, when he goes to sleep, he really goes to sleep, especially if he's sitting in a chair.
I want to know who did that.
That would be me. And
It's funny.
Carmen
I noticed
Basilio.
them, but I
he
was
had
in a big
his
hurry to
shoes
get over
and
there, and
he had his
they
shoes and
put my socks on me, and
can we get the whole story?
all right.
He was sound asleep and he had his shoes and socks off, and the devil made me do it, I guess. But I took some fingernail polish, and the kids thought it was hilarious because I painted these toenails. And when he goes to sleep, he goes to sleep and nothing can move him. So he woke up and we didn't bother to tell him that his toenails were painted. And that day after work, he took the scouts swimming and did not discover the toenails until he was walking around the swimming pool. And he came home and he was not a happy scoutmaster.
There's this guy in the shower that
Huh? So I didn't even have any fingernail polish remover. I had to go over to Kathy Bourne and borrow some.
I don't dare read this next question now. Was your family active in the church? Go ahead.
Yes. My dad was a railroad engineer, and the only office that he ever held was he was a home teacher and a home teacher supervisor, or whatever they called him. Home ward.
Was totally inactive. He was ordained a priest, and that's the highest he got. He took me home teaching once, board teaching. But here's the thing about my dad. I don't know where he got it from. He said one time, I don't know where, but anyway, I went to a dinner here just recently, and my cousin, Marion, who was she must be about close to 80, and I hadn't seen her since I was about 12, and she told me, I asked her if she had any fond memories about my dad when we were over on Gramercy, because her mother lived right next door, her mother and dad, and she says, well, I know your dad sure knew how to swear. And I'm, what? And I guess, I don't know where he got it from, because nobody else swore. But he would come over to Uncle Curly's house one time. Curly was working on something, and he just couldn't get it to work. My dad says, you're not saying the right word. so he told him, he showed him how to do it, and he said, and Curly said these words, and it fixed it.
Was it abracadabra?
What were the words? Tell us.
Can I tell you
Tell
one thing?
us.
Wait. Yeah, go ahead. I have a
I
story
was just
about that.
thinking about activity in the family. My brother baptized me. He was the first one that he ever baptized, and he had just been ordained a priest.
That's cool. So your brother did. That's neat.
Hey, here's something all of you might be interested in.
Well, I don't want to give a bad impression of my dad. He did go through the temple, took my mother through the temple, and in his later life he did sealing, and he did a total turnaround and repented. And he was a good guy. He just grew up in that generation that Tom Brokaw talked about, the greatest generation. And not many of those soldiers that went to battle were without.
He wasn't a soldier though, was he?
Huh?
He wasn't ever a soldier, was he?
No, he wasn't, but he worked on, and we went to Wendover, and he worked on aircraft out there.
Here's something you guys might be interested in that Dad knows.
What are you doing?
Oh, wrong one. Sorry, Jim.
Anyway,
He's telling me.
I was serving in a stake calling not too long ago where the stake president asked me to go through all the filing cabinets in our stake. There are two stakes in Grantsville, the Grantsville stake and the Grantsville West stake. And some of these records had been in there for decades, 60 years, 70 years. And if you know our Tooele County, it all used to be one stake. Tooele, Grantsville, and even Wendover were all in the same stake. They weren't split off until the 40s. Then when it was split off in about 1943, the Grantsville stake consisted of Grantsville and Wendover. So I'm going through these records, just chucking stuff right and left, thinking, man, this, because most of it's worthless, wasn't much historical value. But then I came across these strange looking binders that were black and about this long, really thick, but only narrow. And apparently the church used to have pages, ward history pages that they would send out, and every quarter the wards would fill out their history on the pages and then send it to the stake, and the stake would put it in the binder. I was looking through some of those just out of curiosity, and I noticed that all of the Grantsville wards had like one little page, and this was back in the 40s, but the Wendover branch, it was only a branch, had like 3 or 4 pages, and I thought, well, that's interesting. So I start reading through this stuff, and this is so awesome. Here I am just chucking stuff. I start reading through this, and it says Fred Leslie Beckett, ordained an elder, and it gave the date. He was in the branch at that time, and Dad was, and they were active in the church at that time.
Some guy got a hold of my dad in fellowship, and he got active.
So he wasn't a priest, he was an elder.
An elder.
Because then, in the next quarters, it showed that he held a calling in the elders' quorum. And then he held a calling in the Sunday school. And I just thought, it's one of those tender mercies, you know, that how could I come across this by chance? I'm going through so many papers. I mean, it took me a full Saturday to burn all of the papers that I went through. And this was just one little section of it that I stumbled upon. In the tiny window that they lived at in Wendover for a year and a half, I think 2 years.
2 years after the war.
And that it's just so amazing to me that they kept that record, and there it was. And I still have it at my house. I kept that because I thought, I don't know, I'll probably photocopy it and digitize it and send it to you guys. But I didn't want to send it on to someone else yet because it's meaningless to me. What?
What about those other families?
No, most of it was dry council meetings and just records that don't need to be kept.
Hey, one thing about Great Grandpa Beckett that you could tell too when you talked about the lieutenant, you could see a change in his countenance too. Before, he was a person that wasn't the most pleasant